Welcome, deep divers. Today, we're jumping into something really fundamental for anyone in a creative field. Money, stability.
Right.
We've all heard the struggling artist trope, maybe even romanticized it. But behind that is often, well, low pay, constant hustling, income that's all over the place.
It's a tough reality for many.
But what if that could change?
Yeah.
That's what Ireland explored with its basic income for the arts pilot, the BIA.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got this fantastic qualitative report from Dr. Jenny Dagg, May 2025. It's packed with interviews, the actual experiences of artists who got this basic income.
Exactly. It's not just data points. It's about their lives.
So our mission today is to really dig into that. How did this steady income actually affect them, professionally, personally?
Yeah. Everything from mental health to the art itself, community stuff, what they hope for next. We want to unpack those kind of subjective shifts that happen.
Sounds good. Let's get into it.
Let's do it.
Okay, first things first, the absolute baseline, income stability. What does getting a regular payment actually mean when your work is usually so precarious?
Well, the report immediately flags this huge drop in just background financial stress.
Okay.
People used phrases like winning the lottery, a real comfort. It let them actually budget, plan ahead. That certainty was new.
Wow.
And one person, I thought this was striking, said they felt their shoulders drop, like a physical release of tension.
That's incredible imagery, shoulders dropping. It really paints a picture, doesn't it? Moving beyond just scraping by.
Totally. It shifts the focus.
So practically, how did they use the money? Was it just covering basics?
It was often supplementary, yeah, but critical for those basics.
Hmm.
Rent, bills, food, materials for work, even helping family.
Right.
And for younger artists, it was massive. It meant maybe they didn't have to leave the country to find work. They could afford rent long term, stay near their networks.
So less about just surviving week to week, more about actually building a foundation, security.
Absolutely. A lot of them called it a buffer or a safety net, for when the boiler breaks or you get sick or gear gets stolen, things that could derail you before.
Yeah, those unexpected hits.
And for some, it was the first time they could actually save. Think longer term. One musician mentioned he and his wife could finally, get a house and plan a family.
That is genuinely life-changing stuff, far beyond just the studio.
Mm-hmm.
So how did that stability then feed back into their actual work, their artistic choices?
Well, it gave them more autonomy. Less financial desperation meant they could actually think about what projects they wanted to do.
Oh.
They felt they could say no to things, low-paid gigs or stuff that just didn't feel right, which
Cool.
freed them up for, as the report says, higher quality, more meaningful, and long-term projects.
Makes sense. Quality over just quantity or necessity.
Precisely.
It's fascinating how that financial piece ripples outwards. What about well-being generally, outside of the work itself?
Oh, huge impact there. Physical and mental health. People talked about sleeping better, just lower stress levels overall.
I can imagine.
And that led to more clarity, more confidence. Plus, they actually had the time, and sometimes the money, for checkups. Dental care was mentioned a lot.
Things that easily get pushed aside when you're stretched thin.
Exactly. And accessing mental health support, too. Minding creative minds came up. One musician called it life-changing.
So it's really a shift from just surviving to, well, actually thriving, taking care of themselves.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And it extended to leisure, too. Less guilt about taking time off.
Ah, interesting.
They could afford to go out, see shows, even travel sometimes, maybe mixing work and enjoyment. One visual artist used the money for watercolors to paint outside, just for fun, not for selling, getting back to that simple joy.
That's lovely. A return to enjoyment, not just output. Okay, so we've established this foundation of well-being. How did that then translate into the art? Did the work itself change?
Time. That was the word that kept coming up. Time became this most valuable resource.
They use terms like exponentially more time, unquantifiable, just having that mental space and actual hours freed up.
It's fairly crucial for some, I imagine.
Yes, particularly for disabled artists. The report notes they often need more time to create at their own pace. This gave them that flexibility.
So it allowed for a deeper dedication to the craft itself without constantly juggling other jobs.
Exactly that. Less need for side gigs just to pay the bills. More focus. For younger artists, it was almost like learning how to be a self-employed artist, finding discipline, routine,
And for the more established
a
ones.
shift in momentum and confidence. Maybe finally finishing and releasing work they'd been sitting on, getting it out there.
Okay, so more focus, more confidence. Did it change the nature of the art, the ambition, the the quality.
Yes, definitely.
Mm,
Less background noise, less mental strain, meant better focus, better concentration. That feeds directly into the creative process.
makes sense.
So they felt able to take on bigger projects, things that seemed impossible before. Larger scale, more ambitious projects, as the report puts it. And the process itself, risk-taking.
That's key. Having the time to research, to experiment, to try things that might not work out, even to fail. That actually improved the quality of their work.
The freedom to fail. That's fascinating.
Isn't it? One filmmaker with a disability said, "It's not fear-based, it's exciting, and I'm more confident in taking risks. Failure is a big part of creativity."
Wow. So that safety net actually encourages bolder moves creatively. It feels counterintuitive, but it makes so much sense.
Exactly. Fear holds you back. Stability lets you experiment. Investing time and learning new skills, trying different approaches, maybe projects that felt too risky before because if they didn't pay off, you were sunk.
Right.
This freedom led to, well, more diverse work, more innovation, more authentic expression, perhaps, not just playing it safe.
Okay, so we've seen individual growth, creative flourishing. What about the bigger picture? Their place within the arts sector, opportunities, connections.
Well, they use the BIA for practical professional development too, taking courses, learning new software, buying better equipment, setting up proper websites, investing in themselves as professionals.
And networking. That's always so crucial.
Yeah, and often hard to do when you're juggling multiple jobs. The BIA meant they could actually go to industry events, conferences, festivals, things they previously had to skip.
Did it help break down any existing barriers there? Networking can be tough.
It certainly helped. Now, the report does say barriers still exist, particularly for migrant and disabled artists accessing those sort of formal networks. But for many, the BIA gave them the time and energy to actually pursue those connections.
Any examples?
Yeah, one writer mentioned going to literary festivals and making connections that led to mentoring from established novelists. That's
Not
huge.
that way.
And people formed collectives too, for peer support, but also to advocate for things like community art spaces.
What about collaborations between artists? Did it grease the wheels there?
It did. Some could now afford to hire other professionals, maybe more experienced ones, for their projects.
Raising the bar for their own work.
Exactly. Or they used the BIA to make sure collaborators got paid something, even if the project budget was tight, trying to make things fairer. And some collaborations were specifically about giving back to their communities.
How did that community engagement piece look more broadly, beyond artistic collaborations?
Lots of different ways. Hiring local crew for film projects, running reading groups, organizing fundraisers, deeper local engagement.
But not universally.
No, the report notes some found it hard to engage more, maybe due to neurodivergence or just being really focused on their own intensive projects. It wasn't a magic bullet for everyone's community involvement.
Still, for some, a real shift.
Oh, yes. Especially for socially engaged artists, the BIA let them invest real time in building relationships within communities, not just parachuting in for a short-term funded project.
Ah, that's a really important distinction.
Yeah, one filmmaker talked about being able to spend so much time with people not being paid to do something for a documentary, building trust ethically because he wasn't reliant on that specific project funding his time.
That moves beyond project outcomes
Yeah.
to genuine relationship building.
Powerful. How did getting the BIA affect their relationships with other artists, though? You mentioned collectives, but was there friction?
It's complex. On one hand, the boost in confidence made people reach out more, participate more. They felt more like professionals, more visible.
Right.
But because it was a lottery random selection, there was sometimes guilt for those who got it and maybe animosity from those who didn't.
Yeah, I can see that happening.
So many became quite cautious about who they told, didn't want to flaunt it or create awkwardness. That was a definite tension.
Right. Okay, looking back over the whole experience for these artists, what were the biggest personal takeaways, the really profound shifts?
I think the overwhelming sense was empowerment, control. Feeling like a viable career in the arts was actually possible.
That's huge. Yeah. Just the reduction in financial worry, being able to pay bills without constant stress, and that feeling of being validated. People repeatedly called it life-changing.
Any particular voices stand out?
There's a quote from an older male multidisciplinary artist, he said. At 56, going on 57, I believe in myself and I believe in what I do for the first time in my life ever.
Wow. That really hits home. Just incredible. Were there other maybe unexpected benefits that popped up?
Yeah, a few practical things. Lots of people mention the online sessions the BIA team ran on income tax, helping them figure out self-assessment, which can be really daunting.
Oh, that's super useful.
Definitely. And also things like being able to finally take proper time off to rest, or starting a pension, or affording that dental work we mentioned earlier. Small things, maybe, but they add up to a significant quality of life improvement.
It sounds like it sparked broader thinking, too.
It really did, about how we value artists, how they should be supported, moving beyond just project grants to something more foundational.
But it wasn't all smooth sailing. What were the main challenges or anxieties that came through?
The number one fear, overwhelmingly, was it ending.
Ah, the pilot nature of it.
Exactly. This huge cloud hangs over the future, as one film producer put it. People felt they'd developed a kind of creative dependency and dreaded going back to the old precarity. How would they fill that gap?
That anxiety must have been intense.
Yeah. Plus the guilt and awkwardness around non-recipients we talked about.
Mhm.
And of course the backdrop of rising living costs in Ireland, which the BIA helped with but didn't solve entirely.
And you mentioned we need to specifically look at disabled artists.
Yes, their experience really highlights some specific system-level issues. It's crucial we unpack that.
Okay, lay that out for us.
Yeah.
What are the extra layers for disabled artists?
Well, first, disabled people in Ireland generally face a much higher risk of poverty. There are extra costs. Estimates range from €8,000 to $12,000 a year.
Wow, okay.
Then layer on top the specific challenges for artists. Inaccessible venues or work environments, maybe assumptions about their capacity. And crucially, welfare conditionality,
Meaning?
meaning strict rules about how much you can earn from work, like the BIA, before you lose your essential disability allowance or other supports like a medical card. So many were actually afraid that applying for BIA could make them worse off financially if it jeopardized those core benefits.
That's a terrible catch-22.
It really is. But despite that fear, for those who did get it, the BIA brought huge validation, a recognition of their professional status.
And tangible benefits.
Absolutely. There's a powerful example of a visually impaired artist. She didn't use the BIA to, say, buy a nicer car. She used it to build an accessible studio in her garden.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, completely changing her ability to work effectively and independently. It shows how that unconditional income can be tailored to remove very specific barriers.
A fantastic example of targeted impact. But the systemic hurdles didn't just vanish.
No. That balancing act, earning enough to benefit from BIA, but not too much to lose essential supports, was a constant source of stress for many.
Right.
And another thing that came up, especially from neurodivergent and autistic artists, was the difficulty with standard funding applications, often very text-heavy, bureaucratic.
Yeah, not always the most accessible format.
Exactly. They stressed how important it is for institutions to just proactively ask about accommodations, rather than putting the onus entirely on the artist. Simple, but transformative.
That leads to a broader policy point, doesn't it?
It does. The report strongly suggests that basic income policies must be designed so they don't penalize people for working or force them off essential disability supports. It needs to be integrated, rights-based.
A critical lesson for any future iterations or similar schemes. So looking forward then, what did the artists hope for? What were their aspirations fueled by this experience?
Pretty consistently, they wanted to just keep going, do more of what I am doing, to sustain themselves as full-time artists, to reach a basic standard of living where, a car breakdown isn't a major crisis.
Maintaining that stability and momentum.
Exactly. They saw the BIA as this safety net that's changed so much. It allowed them to be more ambitious, to plan further professional development, maybe even save for those bigger life goals like family or a home.
Giving them room to breathe and grow.
Yeah. As one writer put it, it's like giving basic living conditions for a practice to grow and exist.
Basic living conditions for practice to grow. That sums it up well.
But the fear is real, that without it continuing, they'll slide back. That the energy, the momentum, the creative flourishing we saw, that it gets curtailed again by precarity.
It really lays bare the impact, doesn't it? This deep dive shows just how profound that consistent unconditional income was.
Yeah.
Not just financially, but mentally, creatively, socially. Their whole sense of self-worth seems tied into it.
It's a really powerful case study, yeah. Addressing those fundamental needs seems to unlock so much potential, more than just project funding alone can often achieve.
Which leaves us with a pretty big question hanging in the air, right?
Mm-hmm.
If this pilot worked so well, if it triggered such positive changes, what does that say about how we, as a society, truly value art and artists?
Right. Is it just something nice to have, funded project by project, or is it something vital that needs sustained support?
And how do we make sure those basic living conditions for a practice to grow and exist aren't just a temporary experiment, but something real and lasting for artists everywhere?
That's the crucial next step in the conversation, I think.
Definitely something for all of us to think about. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Hopefully it's giving you plenty to mull over.